Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Innovation Mission to Denmark, a review of Danish biogas models and technologies. I'm Matt Reese, GreenGov Deputy Director. Today's webinar is co-hosted and supported through our partnership with Penn State Sustainability, which is responsible for developing strategic programming and partnerships, such as this one with the GreenGov Council that help leverage their resources to promote sustainability throughout our Commonwealth. The GreenGov Council was established as the Commonwealth Agency's Lead by Example program, promoting energy conservation and sustainable governance. Our charter sets forth performance goals for the Commonwealth, ultimately steering the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions within our portfolio. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Michael Roth, Director of Conservation and Innovation at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. Mike, a Pittsburgh native, acquired his Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies from Washington and Jefferson College and a master's in Public Administration from the University of Pittsburgh. Mike's work focuses on the future of agriculture and its ability to meet the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. Take it away, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Let me start off by just thanking the Green Gov Council as well as Penn State for allowing me to speak with you all today. And again, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll jump right in. Just one moment here. All right, we're set up. And Matt, can you just confirm for me that you can see the screen okay?
It looks good, Mike. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right, everyone. Again, really appreciate your time today. Wanted to share with you all some experiences I had with some other folks from the US on a trip to Denmark this past June as it relates to energy. And fortunately, the main focus of the trip was agriculture and energy. So obviously relevant to the work we do here at PDA. So for today's discussion, just going to do a quick RNG basics for folks in case you're not familiar with it. We'll talk about the trip, talk about agriculture and energy as it relates to Denmark and Pennsylvania, and then we'll jump into what does this actually mean? What's the value from learning from this? The first thing I will just start off with, I think it's important to reflect on this. If you want to look at the two pictures here and think in your mind of which one's Pennsylvania and which one's Denmark, I'll give you just a second here to think through that. You can certainly see some probably familiar things that you would see in Pennsylvania farm fields here. So I will go ahead and say it was a trick question. They are both pictures from Denmark. It looks very similar to Pennsylvania agriculture land. Their land is very similar to ours. I'd say it's a little bit flatter, but other than that, very similar. Crops and farm composition are very similar. So we'll get into some of that as well. So for those that don't know, there's lots of terms out there like biogas, renewable natural gas, and then you get into concentrated natural gas and liquid natural gas, compressed natural gas. So just wanted to give sort of the precursor here of what we're talking about. So the first thing is biogas, which biogas comes from the process of anaerobic digestion, which is a natural process. If you're ever near, a swamp or something like that, you smell sort of those odors. That's the different materials breaking down in the absence of oxygen, deep under that water and in the mud and things like that. So we can mimic that process with man-made type processes here. And we can capture methane from that to be used for a number of different things. So whenever you hear biogas, that's sort of the raw stuff coming off of the raw gases coming off of the breakdown of organic materials. What's important to know, though, is to enable that to be used in what we typically think of natural gas type processes, it does need to be upgraded and cleaned. And that's where we get into the RNG or renewable natural gas. That's pipeline quality gas. And again, absolutely no different to natural gas that we frack for. It's just coming from a different source. So it can be used completely interchangeably. And it also can be, just like natural gas, be turned into compressed natural gas or liquid natural gas for any sort of transportation type opportunities there might be as well. So I did put the title here, a more natural gas. Literally, this is gas that could be coming from grass-fed operations as well as it could be locally sourced. So just like we talk about the importance of regionality and local food sheds, we can talk about that from energy in this perspective as well. And just the diagram here, just the very basics is we put in manure or other waste material from the ag industry, food waste, as well as potentially some crops in the future. We put them in the digester, which you'll see many pictures of here in just a moment. It doesn't have oxygen within there. And then we get a lot of great output. So we can get energy, and that's in the form of that biogas, which we can either directly burn into electricity, or we can upgrade it and put it in the gas lines. And then on the other side, there we still have all that organic material in there. We just have taken the methane out of it, and that serves as really good domestic natural fertilizer. So just to give you a sense of the trip, again, we went a little bit all over the country, but these are some of the entities that we interacted with. Nice overview of different biogas companies as well as agricultural companies that seem to be very well coordinated, as well as their government entities. Really great exposure to the different aspects that made the biogas sector in Denmark work. And I should have put a slide in here for those that don't know. Denmark sits right on top of Germany, is right next to Sweden and Norway, and it's almost surrounded by water on all sides, but very beautiful country. So why would we look at Denmark as a comparable to Pennsylvania? Well, Denmark's a third the size of Pennsylvania, so it's a nice sort of little ecosystem that we can sort of scale up to look at the Pennsylvania ecosystem as well. But fascinatingly, they have very similar numbers of animal numbers when it comes to dairy. So we're about the same. It's just their average cow size on farms is a little bit bigger. So they have a few more cows than we do per farm. But in general, it's fairly close. And again, just like we have co-ops, they have co-ops as well, supporting their dairy industry and doing value-added processing. The one notable difference here, I will just say, is that they have 13 times the swine that we do on, a third of the land. So very impressive. But just something else to note there as far as what sort of biomass, biosolids they might have. Just a quick call out here. I was very impressed with their agricultural operations. I know this isn't energy necessarily related, but they have very advanced climate priorities and strategies that are farmer led and focused, as well as we were able to tour a dairy where if they only had 3 people working at a 250 cow dairy because they had 2 robotic milkers. And they had active livestock data collection from various different types of technologies. I think the farmer there was in his late 70s, and he was more than comfortable to have robots and all sorts of other data collection systems in his operation. So I just thought that was a good sign for the future here in Pennsylvania, where we also have smaller dairies that are struggling. There might be some great opportunities utilizing technology. So just a quick energy comparison. I'm sure I don't have to remind anyone here, most of our electricity and energy coming from natural gas here in Pennsylvania. In Denmark, it's a little bit different. They certainly have their fossil fuels, but they also have a pretty sizable wind and solar. A lot of that wind is offshore, and then a significant amount from biofuels and waste. So definitely a different energy mix, but I think absolutely still okay to take lessons learned from them as well. And as you can see, they're sort of in the middle of the pack as far as carbon intensity in Europe, but obviously our state alone is very high up in carbon intensity here in the US. And I will say one important factor to remember about that is that Pennsylvania provides energy to a lot of neighboring states. So it's not just that Pennsylvania is using a lot of energy, which we certainly do, but we are serving the energy needs of New York, Virginia, and many other states surrounding us. So I thought this was fairly interesting here. This is the inputs and the yield from different commodities that are going into their biogas systems. And again, we'll see some of those here in just a second. But as you can see, they call it slurry. We would call that, sort of manure management type stuff. But that's just sort of the liquid effluent that has some solids in it from manure waste, or sorry, from dairy cows. And as you can see, that's the vast majority of the stuff that's in, as far as volume, that's going into these digesters, as well as some other things. Obviously, they have all the swine, so there's other livestock manure. And then they're doing some really fascinating things with things like straw, where they're able to get some interesting effects here, and we'll look at that in just a second. But as you can see, the vast majority of their natural gas, renewable natural gas side of things, biogas, I should say, is coming from agriculture. So I'm sure many of you know we have some biogas facilities here that are on landfills and other industrial sites. But Denmark really doesn't have that much in the way of those sort of operations. They do a lot of burning of their waste, and they have some fairly strict rules around waste in general. So they have a lot more in terms of sourcing from agricultural entities. The one thing I did want to call out here, though, is that the yield, so essentially how much methane you're going to get from these inputs, is very different than the composition, as you can see. And of note there, I'll just show you one that, with some background knowledge, is not surprising. The industrial waste, that's your food waste, is generally much more able to create methane than just straight manure. So that's not too surprising to us. But the one standout I just point out is the straw and sort of those ag residuals from grain production. You can see that it's only 2% of the mix, but it's 9% of the yield. So they have some really interesting technologies using fermentation as well as pelletization of these commodities that we obviously would have feedstock here in Pennsylvania. And we could potentially use that as well to boost the yield of methane in our digester systems. So the if you take anything away from this presentation, or if you need some good stuff to share at a cocktail party, this sentence here is the one to take away. I was blown away by this, but currently, if you take all the gas usage in Denmark, 40% of it is coming from biogas, and that is coming from agriculture. And they're going to hit 100% of all their natural gas coming from uh, biogas in 2030. So very impressive number. And I think it really speaks to, we talk often in the agricultural community about how food security is directly tied to national security. I think, again, by investing in agriculture, and particularly at this nexus of energy and agriculture, we can even further that message on how important agriculture is for energy security, obviously food security, and that, again, all leads to national security. So I think it's a really great model, and very interesting. So to give you a sense of scale, on the right here is a good friend, Matt, over at Dickinson Farm, where that's a fairly typical digester that we might have here in Pennsylvania right now. It's on a farm. It's, only operating in concert with that individual farm. So, small scale, but doing really great stuff. You're mitigating the methane emissions from the dairy operation. You're producing a local domestic fertilizer supply. It's doing really great stuff. So the key difference between what we have right now, and we probably have about 30 on-farm digesters here in Pennsylvania. The key difference is just the scale. So Denmark has made lots of investments to get biogas to scale, utility scale biogas facilities like you see there on the left. So these facilities work just the same way. It's the same mechanism. There's nothing very different. It's just much larger. And again, they're taking food waste, they're taking animal manure, and a number of other different things to produce this green energy. So again, something we do now, it's just looking at it at a different scale. So big picture here, the Danish biogas model, like I said, they're taking liquid slurry that could be from a dairy farm, organic residues, and they're taking that to the digester site, and that produces renewable energy for them, as well as improved fertilizer, and less of a reliance on chemical fertilizers as well. Now, for us, we are very fortunate that we have a lot of resources here domestically, and we can always benefit from improving our supply chains. But just, I think it's important to take into account the geopolitical side of this as well. Denmark is not that far away from some of the conflicts that are happening in Europe. And as I'm sure many of you know, a lot of the natural gas as well as fertilizer that is produced from natural gas comes from other nations that maybe aren't the nicest neighbors for a Denmark. So these investments in ag and energy, again, are directly tied to national security, but also just that confidence that your supply chains will be there when you need them, as well as your food and energy. So where this really gets interesting, though, and what I'm excited to continue to dive into is that unlike what we do here in Pennsylvania, and I'd say largely the US, where we're either just producing the methane and putting it onto the grid as RNG, or if we're or we can just burn it for electricity. They're looking at the value added processing that can be tacked on top of what you're doing with biogas already. So I thought this was a fascinating one here through a company called Nature Energy, where they do the normal anaerobic digestion process, but what they do after they produce the methane is they take the CO2, which is considered biogenic CO2 since it is from the natural sources. They mix that with green hydrogen that they're producing from all the excess wind power they have, and they're creating synthetic methane through a process called methanization. So what they're able to do is for those really hard to decarbonize parts of their transportation or heavy industry, they can create biogenic based methane from both green hydrogen as well as the agricultural industry to help decarbonize things like heavy trucking. So again, those areas that right now it's a little bit difficult to do with batteries or electricity, you can hit them with this sort of gas production system that's an add-on to the digesters. So really interesting and a great demonstration, I would argue, of decarbonization strategies that really engage not just those high level entities, but really on the ground. You have farmers in Denmark completely engaged in the decarb strategy for entire industries, which I think is really cool. There's some additional value added things that are of great interest. So obviously, when you're burning that methane, let's say you're burning it on site for electricity generation, you're still going to have CO2, but as I'm sure most of you know, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. So that does get you a step better as far as your process there. But now that you have this source of biogenic CO2, it's not, obviously coming from fossil fuels. It's obviously good if you can use it for something. So this is just one company that's been doing really well in Denmark, where they're taking that excess CO2 and using it to boost the production of algae that then create different products. So things like proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamins, as well as animal feed and a multitude of other things. So again, great demonstration of what that triple bottom line we're trying to achieve is, as well as the circular economy sort of direction that they're headed. So again, a great value add that they're tacking on to their digestion systems. So why is this relevant to Pennsylvania? How's it relevant to what we're trying to do? Well, to take a quick step back, I will just note that Governor Shapiro pushed very hard for an agriculture innovation fund here in Pennsylvania, and we were successful in getting that for the 2024 budget. And the governor also laid out his 5 pillars for economic development, and the first one was agriculture. But as you can see, there's 4 other pillars, and I'll get to it in a second. They all can tie back to ag. But this all sort of runs in parallel with what we saw in Denmark. And I would put forward that Governor Shapiro's sort of 5 pillar ecosystem could all be tied to agriculture very clearly. So we already know with our friends at Carnegie Mellon and many other universities here in Pennsylvania, there's lots we can do with agrobotics and using AI to help us improve yields and improve production, as well as reduce the reliance on labor that unfortunately currently doesn't even exist and we're struggling to deal with. As far as manufacturing, there's all sorts of, obviously, we have Hershey and many other entities manufacturing agricultural products. We highlighted the ag to energy. as well as the life sciences. Every component we saw in Denmark was partnered up with a lab that was supporting the production of those facilities. So, again, just wanted to drive home that agriculture can play a vital role in this new economic development plan for Pennsylvania. So how does that relate to the Danish biogas sector? Well, again, like I just said, it's of course agriculture. It's definitely energy. All of this relies on the science and life sciences that we would have here to make sure this works appropriately. Obviously, manufacturing and robotics and technology as well, like I had mentioned. So again, what are some of the opportunities here? Well, the good news is, since it is a drop-in fuel, we can utilize existing gas assets. So we're not just going to walk away from everything we've put in here in Pennsylvania as far as all the gas infrastructure. We can use that as is. We can also support rural economies. So the farmer, in Washington County or Butler or Beaver County can now be part of the process of decarbonizing, as well as making money and supporting their communities that they may not have felt if they were not part of the process and it was just, the funding going to other mitigation strategies. And then the other thing is that this is a whole new realm for us to continue to foster research and innovation that again includes those folks on the ground level, at the farm level, at the manufacturing level for different equipment needed for the energy industry. So it's not as disruptive as it is. It more does a nice job of wrapping around the assets we already have. And as you can see, I sort of laid this out in the chart here. We can utilize what we typically see as liabilities or waste, and we can use those as assets to both decarbonize, but also support rural economies through sustainability. So there is some good news. We have some great actors already here in Pennsylvania too. Just to highlight, we have Ecotone Renewables, who does sort of micro digesters to produce locally made, well, first to handle food waste, but also local production of sustainable fertilizers, as well as we'll have our first regional digesters similar to those we saw in Denmark going up in Indiana County, Pennsylvania. So, again, we have some players here already. We're eager to continue to engage with the Danes on this as well. And again, if anyone's familiar with DEP, this is in, I believe, their mission statement. And the nice thing is that this does not have to be in conflict with energy production and the environment and food production. It's very harmonious with all these different needs we have here in the Commonwealth. So again, zooming way out here, what do these interventions do? Well, they help us obviously address climate change related challenges, but they also help us mitigate and adapt to these challenges that we're facing. Um, and this really goes into like what are the benefits of investing in this. And of course, it's farm vitality and prosperity, it's safe and ample agriculture supply, clean air, water, and land. But as you can see, it touches so many different elements of our daily lives as well as that of the economic aspects of the Commonwealth as well. So just a shameless plug here, and it does. I'm sorry to say this ends today. So if you're thinking about applying for this, you definitely would need to do it soon. But I just say this, put this here to say that often we are shown very cool things happening either in other states or across the world, and we say that looks great, and we'll think about it, and that's as far as it goes. But I'm very proud to share, and based on what I was telling you before from the governor, we have $10 million this year to support innovation in agriculture. So these types of systems that I just showed you, these ideas and concepts of circular economy relating to agriculture are absolutely things we're looking to invest in. So we do have the Ag Innovation Fund. Again, unfortunately, it does close today, but we hope to have it next year as well. And we want to make investments in folks that are trying to do these great things, that are engaging the ag community, engaging rural economies in these topics that are the greatest issues of our time. So with that, I thank you, and I think Matt, maybe we have some time for questions.
Yeah, and thanks, Mike. And we were going to go ahead and stop our recording.